Story 1. Architect and city planner. 20 years later, it worked out. For the most part, it's not what I thought it would be when I was 7, but in some ways, it actually is. No regrets. Story 2. I wanted to be a model. The fact that I wasn't skinny, tall, or pretty didn't seem like an obstacle. Story 3. I wanted to be a superhero. I used to jump around my living room in my red Power Ranger Halloween costume, with my security blanket tied around my neck as a cape, playing Jukebox Hero by Foreigner on repeat. Story 4. I found a workbook from kindergarten where I had written, although somewhat illegibly, washing machine under a question. Story 5. An actress. My mom let me tell everyone, and it was a while before I found out that's what the girls are called. I quickly switched to actor. Story 6. Honest to God, at 7 years old, I wanted to work at Kmart because I loved the products they sold. I actually got hired at my dream Kmart but didn't take the position. Dream big. Kids. Story 7. I wanted to be a first-grade teacher to help children learn to read. However, the year I started college, I was diagnosed with epilepsy, which made that impossible. Story 8. I started telling everyone I was going to be a professional artist when I was about 2. It was all I ever wanted to be. My mother said I couldn't do that, but it would be a good hobby. I was always looking for ways to sell art. I started making jewelry in my mid-teens, and all my teachers told me I would have to teach. After my first husband and I divorced, he thought art was a nice little hobby. I started doing wall murals and hand-painted furniture through an antique store. I did that, along with stained glass, professionally for almost 30 years. I'm retired now and paint for my own pleasure. You were right, Mom. It's a good hobby. Story 9. Everything. A cartoonist, the president, an author, a dancer, a gardener, a director, and a cook. I have a wide variety of interests, but I get bored of them quickly, which is why I never pursued higher education in any of those fields. However, I do want to go to school to be a dietitian because my reasons extend beyond just my fascination with diet, and that's empowering enough to motivate me to give it a try one day. Story 10. A famous astronomer, the next Carl Sagan, didn't work out that way, but my love of astronomy and space-related topics is still going strong. Story 11. I wanted to be an artist mostly because as a child, I was often told that it was the only thing I was good at. Story 12. I wanted to be a mad scientist. I ended up as a statistician working in healthcare, which isn't quite the same, but it probably pays better. Story 13. Since my uncle introduced me to professional wrestling, I wanted to become a professional wrestler. During my teenage years, I discovered deathmatch wrestling and decided that was my true calling. Story 14. Elementary school teacher. I just wanted to have fun. I wanted to exercise every single day as a physical education teacher in an elementary school. I also aspired to be a firefighter. Story 15. A singer in a band and fashion designer. I wanted to design the stage outfits my band would wear and also open a store and brand. Story 16. Sports agent, specifically for National Basketball Association players. Nothing has changed. I just settled as an accountant for a forklift company. Story 17. A Starfleet captain or a priest. Then I learned we were Catholic and girls were not allowed to be priests, and also Starfleet was not real. Story 18. I remember when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I wanted to be a garbage collector because they could ride on the outside of the truck. Story 19. I am a scientist, and my love for the natural world has remained strong. I earned my doctorate in behavioral and spatial ecology several years ago, and now work as a research scientist focusing on environmental health and climate resilience. Story 20. Oddly, as a child, I found the drug packaging in small containers to be interesting, as well as the compounding of creams. I feel unusual that I didn't aspire to be a ballerina or something similar. Story 21. I wanted to be the custodian when I was in elementary school. I thought the cart with all the supplies and tools was the coolest thing. Story 22. As a toddler, a fire truck was my dream. Then, as a child, I wanted to be a marine biologist specializing in the migratory habits of great white sharks. As a teenager, I aspired to run a record store and bakery. Now, I focus on whatever helps pay the bills. Story 23. I was an art teacher, then an archaeologist, a horse trainer, a physical therapist, and a tattoo artist. Now I work in technology. I still want to be an archaeologist. Maybe someday. Story 24. A temptation or a supreme. Stay with me here. I was about 5 when one of my grandparents retired. I didn't know what that meant, so when the adults explained it to me, I had this light bulb moment. One day they would have to retire and then I could do that job. I had high ambitions. Story 25. An inventor. I watched Gremlins several times as a child, and the toothpaste toothbrush multi-tool inspired me. Story 26. I wanted to be a comedic actor, but at age 10, I always told people I wanted to be a caterpillar when I grow up. I was a strange kid. Now I'm a strange adult. Story 27. Veterinarian. I remember being in preschool and saying I wanted to be a veterinarian. I studied for a year to become a veterinary technician, but it wasn't for me. I realized I wanted to be friends with animals more than performing surgeries. Story 28. At the age of 6, I wanted to be a cook. At 7, I wanted to be Napoleon. My ambition has been growing steadily ever since. Salvador Dali. Story 29. I became a lawyer because my parents said I would be good at it. It wasn't until later in life that I realized it was a sarcastic comment about how many questions I asked and my difficulty in accepting things that didn't make sense to me. Story 30. I initially wanted to be a veterinarian, but I didn't want to think about animals being hurt. After that, I considered becoming a chemist to experiment with chemical reactions. Then I aimed to be a teacher, and now I am an aspiring actress. Story 31. A lot of different things that I am too embarrassed to admit here. The only one that isn't ridiculous is anthropologist, which I decided on at 8. The only issue is I do not have the money or the ability to go through school without getting upset. Story 32. Princess, dolphin trainer, veterinarian, psychological profiler. Now I'm almost 25 and I have no clue at all. Story 33. I am an elementary teacher and special education teacher. I completed 2 years of college but then got promoted at work and now earn double what I would as a teacher while working in mechanical maintenance instead. Story 34. When I was in first grade, I apparently wanted to be a teacher. I grew older and thought that was crazy. There was no way I had the patience to be a teacher. Years later, after college, I attended graduate school to become a teacher. My first grade self knew what was up. Story 35. When I was very young, I dreamed of becoming an astronaut. In middle school, I wanted to be a professional basketball player. In high school, my aspiration was to be a rock star. Unfortunately, none of those dreams came true. Story 36. I wanted to be a doctor. Neither of my parents had any education and did not value education beyond the 8th grade. They also did not value me, telling me I should just find a good man to support me. I graduated high school and left home at 17. I put myself through college and then medical school, and I retired from medicine at 55. I never spoke to my parents again. Story 37. When you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up? I am sure I wanted to be rich, but that didn't happen. Story 38. I wanted to be a photographer for a teen magazine so I could meet all the cute boys, like David Cassidy and Donny Osmond. Alternatively, I thought about marrying a cowboy so I could have a horse. That was my typical 10-year-old dream. Story 39. A nurse, but then I realized I cannot stand the sight of blood or seeing people in pain. Not even on television. By the time I was 12, I knew I wanted to be an accountant, and I am. Story 40. I never had a strong preference for any particular career. I just wanted my own family and to be able to go on vacation. Story 41. At first, I wanted to be an astronaut. Then I had a tumor in my head. I got it removed and made a full recovery, but my inner ear on one side is so damaged that I can't even fly on a plane or climb a mountain without being in serious pain. Then I wanted to be a chef. I went to culinary school, landed a great job, and then the COVID-19 pandemic hit, causing me to lose that job. I spent months trying to find something, but nothing panned out or paid enough. After that, I wanted to be a software developer. I went back to school, earned an associate degree, and took the first job I could find. I ended up getting fired after only a month because I struggled with computers, and I was surprised that I even managed to earn a degree in the first place. I did some freelance web design work but realized I wasn't good at it either and didn't enjoy it enough to put in the effort to improve. Next, I wanted to get into craft beer. I got a job with a brewery and worked my way up from line cook to waiter to bartender to head bartender to packaging specialist to assistant brewer. My bosses didn't pay me well, and from what I've heard, it isn't much better anywhere in the industry. At this point, I think I'm just going to show up at my community college and have them guide me on what to do with my life. If it doesn't pan out this time, I might just give up and liquidate my savings to enjoy my life in peace. Story 42. I started as a pilot but became an engineer in the semiconductor industry. I am happy in my career. The company treats us well, and my schedule is flexible, which contributes to a good work-life balance. Additionally, the pay is satisfactory. Story 43. A marine biologist. I am pursuing a career in environmental conservation and wildlife study. I believe I am doing quite well. Story 44. An architect recently told me that math has been done by computers for years. Story 45. I ended up being a nurse and I chose the right career. I wouldn't have been happy as a doctor. Story 46. A movie director. I watched Jurassic Park and thought it would be fantastic to create something similar. Now I'm the manager of a company that conducts food tours. It's still very enjoyable. Story 47. A librarian. Until I found out you have to nearly be a historian and spend many years to get your degree. Respect to all librarians. Story 48. Feature animation animator. Now they have harmed the two-dimensional animation industry, and the moderators on the animation career subreddit are irritable. Story 49. Famous musical artist. I create music and perform occasionally. I often hear, "I remember seeing you perform," but it is not a full-time job. I do it only sometimes. Story 51. Astronaut. 2. Police officer. 3. Author/general creative writing like scripts. How it's going? I was very serious about it for a while, but bullying and the growing realization that, while I'm smart enough to pursue this path, I can't afford the degrees or have the time to focus on them for the chance to go into space. I wouldn't need payment. Just work me hard. I don't care as long as I'm in space. Crime fighting seems practically useless with people literally being released the same day and continuing to engage in illegal activities while politicians claim, "This is the way it has always been." Yet I remember a time when I felt safe on the streets. I am also pursuing game design. Wish me luck. I have lots of stories I hope to tell one day. Story 51. According to my parents, when I was very young, I wanted to be a teacher. Then I wanted to work at Nintendo. As I got older, I realized that was an unrealistic dream and instead wanted to start developing games. I have not made any progress yet, but it's something I hope to tackle as a passion project if the degree I am pursuing in software engineering includes a programming class. Story 52. I am a race car driver, currently 19 years old and unemployed. While I cannot race, I have learned how to drift my truck very well and can hold a continuous donut. Story 53. A game show host. I would make the buzzer noise in second grade if someone answered a question incorrectly. If they got it right, I would say, "Congratulations, you just won a new car." My teacher quickly put an end to that. Story 54. I can't remember everything, but I recall my teacher saying I would grow up to be an alcoholic construction worker. Luckily for her, she made a good guess. Story 55. New Zealand's first astronaut was also the manager of our football team. However, I realized I would lose my beloved anonymity if I took on that role. Story 56. Comic book artist. I realized that I can draw well but not create new characters. I can only duplicate other artists' drawings. Architect. I was good at math until I encountered trigonometry and physics. I realized I wasn't as proficient as I thought. Story 57. I always wanted to be an actor. I had joined a theater group, but there was something else written. Story 58. I have wanted to be a doctor ever since I bought my first anatomy textbook at the age of 5. I will apply to medical school next month. Story 59. I wanted to be a war correspondent. I was 10 when Iraq invaded Kuwait, and I wanted to be one of those journalists wearing a helmet and a flak jacket. Story 60. I had it mapped out to be an equine practitioner, which would have also allowed me financially to have my own farm. I had picked out New Mexico, where there used to be many farms raising racing quarter horses. I'm not sure if that's still the case. Story 61. Police officer in a special department. It was a dream career, but to be honest, in our country, it is not a well-paid job and is also quite dangerous. Story 62. Pilot or something related to computer graphics and animation. I have a flight license and work in post-production. The journey was challenging and full of obstacles. Story 63. I wanted to be a garbage collector, so I could ride around town hanging off the back of the truck like a total badass. Story 64. So many things. When I was a child, I wanted to be an astronaut or something related to space. Although I am good at math, I dislike doing it, so that option is out. I also wanted to be a DJ or music producer, but my dad told me that is not a real job and encouraged me to go to college. So I did, earned a degree I do not use, and now I do something entirely different. I do not love my current job, but I do not hate it either. I have always wanted to be an author. I have written a lot of material, mostly in the science fiction or fantasy genres. However, I would rather not let anyone read it, and I refuse to try to publish anything because I worry that people might think it is embarrassing. Story 65. My little sister wrote one of those all about me type books back in kindergarten, the ones where you draw simple stick figures and write everything in crayon, and half of the words contain backwards letters. Well, when it got to the page that said, "What do you want to be when you grow up? Draw it below," she wrote, and I quote, "I want to be the tooth fairy when I grow up because she has all the money. My family was extremely poor growing up. My parents got a big laugh out of that one, and we never let her live it down." Story 66. When I was 8, I told my teacher that when I grew up, I wanted to do the things that appeared on the computer screen. It was Microsoft Paint, and it was my first time seeing a computer. I have been a programmer for almost 15 years. Story 67. A model. I read in a magazine that to be a fashion model, you needed to be a minimum of 5 feet 8 inches, so I would lie in bed and pray to be at least that height. I ended up exactly 5 feet 8 inches, even though none of my siblings are as tall as I am. Now, I dislike my height and wish I were shorter. I also forgot to pray to be super skinny and beautiful, so I never became a model, just sort of tall. Story 68. When I was little, I told my mom I wanted to be a Walmart cashier. After 4 years of customer service work, I can say I was an immature child. Story 69. Aircraft pilot. With my worsening eyesight and consequent depression, lower grades, and family issues, I essentially gave up. In high school, I experienced my lowest point and promised myself never to return there. I worked for a couple of years in the aviation industry and remained close to airplanes. I have seen things you wouldn't believe. All those moments lost in time, like tears in the rain. Hopefully, I can land on my feet soon and be back close to the industry in the future. Story 70. I wanted to be an astronaut. This remained my plan up until my senior year of high school. I had learned about the mental requirements and the training involved. I was a straight-A student with a strong background in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and it seemed like all that stood between me and the space shuttle was obtaining a good degree from a reputable school and applying. Up until that point, I had never been rejected from anything except relationships. Several events occurred that year. First, I learned about the physical fitness requirements and the necessity of a background in military aviation to actually pilot the spacecraft. This led me to discover the vision and size requirements as well. At that time, I was ineligible for flight status due to my eyesight and dimensions, specifically my very long torso, which made me unsuitable for fighter jets. Not wanting to join the military only to find I could not fly, I had to abandon that dream. This situation resulted in a crisis because my backup plan of becoming a space shuttle pilot was to become a fighter pilot, which was also not an option. I ultimately decided to pursue what I was good at and built a career around it. I have a spouse, children, and overall a great life. However, a few developments shortly after I graduated high school could have changed everything had I known. Certain types of vision correction became acceptable for military pilots. I have also learned that some cockpits can accommodate my seated height, but this information was not readily available in 1998. Had an Air Force recruiter spoken to me in 1999 or 2000, my life would likely be very different. In retrospect, this would have made the Columbia disaster in 2003 even more heartbreaking for me. Story 71. A truck driver, but it didn't work out that way. I found that you can make more money answering phones than driving trucks. Story 72. No child ever says, "When I grow up, I want to be an addict," but it happens. No one says, "I want to grow up and watch all my friends and family die before me," but it happens. No one says, "I want to drift from one meaningless job or spouse to another to try to find happiness," but it happens to many of us. Story 73. A hairstylist, and I did not like it very much. So then I went to school to become a certified nursing assistant. I loved that for a long time. After that, I worked as a bartender for a while. Now, I clean houses and earn between $22 and $35 an hour for each job. I love that. Story 74. I changed my mind a lot. I wanted to be a singer, and I create music. Then I wanted to be a police officer. At 27, I am working towards becoming a paramedic. Story 75. A fighter pilot, but people say girls can't do that. So I considered being an F1 driver, but again faced the same remark. Eventually, I settled on becoming a veterinarian. Story 76. I want to be a fire truck, not a fireman. I want to be the truck with a big ladder or a cool water cannon. People laughed and said I would get over it, but I am 43 and it is still what I want. Story 77. I grew up in Florida and was fascinated with weather, especially hurricanes and tornadoes. I wanted to be a meteorologist, but I learned a musical instrument in 9th grade. By 10th grade, I wanted to be a music teacher. I am now in my 32nd year as a music teacher, with the last 27 years as a college professor. Story 78. I am a musician, but not a particularly famous one. I wanted to earn a living by playing guitar, but now I am pursuing a career as a lawyer. I understand that I do not have the unwavering passion required to be a successful full-time musician. Story 79. I wanted to go professional on a BMX bike, but I ran out of talent. I had fun before reality hit me, though. Story 80. I can't remember ever wanting a career or a job in that manner. I wanted to be a larger version of myself with freedom. At 36, I still don't want a specific career or job, just enough money to do what I actually want. Things that I like. I can imagine hating a job, and I can envision being comfortable in my current role. However, I can't imagine wanting a job. Story 81. As a toddler, I thought I wanted to be president. I am glad I grew out of that childish fantasy. Now, I have no desire to govern anything. Story 82. A princess clown worked at the state fair. I succeeded in one of those. Unfortunately, this isn't a joke like, haha, I'm in real-life clown. No, I eventually did work a summer at the state fair. I am still not a princess or a clown. Story 83. I was determined to become a theme park designer. I wanted to build roller coasters and plan parks for a living. I really let Roller Coaster Tycoon influence me as a child. Story 84. I loved building things like blocks and forts, and I enjoyed watching people construct them. I even participated in Habitat for Humanity projects with my family for a few years. I loved mixing and smoothing concrete and nailing roof tiles. I never got to use the saws because I was too young. For career day, I asked my mom about the profession that builds houses, and she said, architect. I took her word for it. The outfit she prepared for me included a button-up shirt, slacks, a tie, and a clipboard with math on it. I was very confused but didn't say anything. Where was my vest and hard hat? I realized my mistake when I talked to my teacher. I wanted to be a construction worker. I told my mom what I learned when I got home, and she was a little disappointed and didn't really encourage me to pursue that particular dream. Construction work is an important job. I enjoyed experimenting with design and had a bit of an interest in math, but I just wanted to move some materials. I still do. Story 85. Literally everything made it difficult to choose just one thing. Now I am a stay-at-home mom who works part-time at a thrift store. Story 86. I am a veterinarian and a music teacher. I taught music for a couple of years and now I substitute teach. I love animals, and being a musician is still my passion. Story 87. My mom enrolled me in speech and debate class because I wanted to become a lawyer. After moving to the United States, I joined the debate team in high school and realized that I struggled with it. Story 88. The pharmacist then worked in a pharmacy while attending college and realized it was essentially a retail job, which led to a change in my major. How I ended up in construction is a story for another day. Story 89. When I was in middle school and earlier, I wanted to pursue engineering. My uncle is an engineer and it sounded incredible. However, in high school, I discovered my passion for music. I realized during my sophomore year that my calling was to be a band director. I have been out of school and college for 5 years now, but I eventually want to try again to obtain my bachelor's degree in music education. Story 90. I began as a space scientist, then transitioned to a water scientist. I realized I needed a neurotypical brain at least 50% larger than my current one. Now, I am an unemployed mother on the verge of homelessness. Story 91. As a child, I knew I wanted to have my own family and was the designated babysitter no matter where we were. Cancer nearly stole this dream, but I am thankful every day for my children. I am still like a magnet to kids and dogs, and I truly love it most of the time. Story 92. Not when I was little, but I wanted to be a filmmaker throughout my teenage years for a long time. I am happy working as a mental health therapist today. Story 93. I am a lawyer. From the age of 5 until I turned 17, I spoke with lawyers about law school and their daily lives, gaining insight into their work. However, I am now an accountant. Story 94. A cop, lawyer, astronaut. Then switched to musician, activist, astronaut. I'm floundering in IT support as an adult. Story 95. I wanted to have a job where I could draw and create. I have been a graphic designer for 15 years, so I am well aligned with that goal. My other aspiration was to be a singer, but I realized that I am not very good at it. Story 96. I wanted to work with animals, and for years, teachers and mentors encouraged me to pursue a creative hobby because I liked art. So I went to art school, but I absolutely hated it. Now I have about 8 years of experience in animal care and pet grooming. When I look back, all I can see is my younger self being elated to work with pets every day. It's something I'm passionate about and truly happy doing. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.